Woman and
What?
Good evening.
ELL, all that kind of stuff. So
Good evening. This is the call to order for the in-person special meeting of the Bridgeport Board of Education. Today is Monday, March 16th, and it is 6:35 p.m. We are at City Hall, room 305. Getting attendance real quick. I'm Jennifer Perez. Board Chair, we have Albert Benningham, Carol Hollis, Robert Traver, Joseph Talbot. Andre Woodson. Online, we have Lamont Daniels and Maritza Estremera Jimenez. And tonight's meeting is a presentation from Shipman and Goodman on Board of Education Service. Laws, insights, and practical tips. They got my glasses at you. All right, over to Smith.
Yes, Jessica Smith.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to meet all of you, see some of you who I've met before. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Obviously, I'm new here. Thank you for selecting us as your council. Tonight, I thought we could use as an opportunity for the presentation to talk about what I know you've heard about before, but also to go through some scenarios so we can discuss the practical application of some of the things that I'm sure you've heard many times before. And I'd also love to just get to know you, hear your questions. You can certainly ask me questions as we go through. Should be fairly interactive and informal. It's really a chance for you to get to understand some of the things that I'm going to share tonight. So on the agenda is, first of all, we'll talk about the board's roles and responsibilities, the superintendent's roles and responsibilities, and how those two things interact, how they're similar, how they're different. We'll then talk about the Freedom of Information Act, which, as I'm sure you all know, is the law that governs how you operate. It also governs the principles under which all of your records are public. So I'll give you some tips on that. And finally, if we have time, we'll talk about communication and information sharing. I have a lot of scenarios in here, and I really want to focus on those because they're frankly more interesting. I've written these scenarios. Some of them were adapted from experiences I've had with other boards, and I'd love to hear from all of you as to how you might approach them. So I'm going to start with, since I know that you've all heard this many times before, I'm going to start with a question, which is, before you look at my slides, what is your perspective on the role of the Board of Education versus the next question will be the role of the superintendent and the administration? So what are some of the board's primary roles or functions?
As a board member and be elected for the community, I always say I work for the community because they trust me. So it doesn't mean I work for them. It's for the best for the future, present and future for our kids. The support for our staff, because without the staff, the kids they don't have the education. But the most important, parents, because the parents is the one who out and vote to us, for the board members.
Yeah.
We have to work with them and listen what they want, because I know they want the best education for the kids.
Absolutely. Liaising with the community, being the eyes and ears of the community around the board table is very important. And different boards do that in different ways, for sure.
At Mr. Benahay's point, we are agents of the state to carry out the educational interests of the state, which include hiring the superintendent, evaluating the superintendent's contract, the budget, and the contract approvals, a whole host of other things. And to Mr. Benahay's point, when we say we're creatures of the state and agents of the state is not Vermont, the state is not the General Assembly, the state is made up of the people of the state of Connecticut.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. That's exactly right. The boards of education in Connecticut are agents of the state of Connecticut. They're not agents of the city of Bridgeport, for example. And your primary obligation is to implement the educational interests of the state. So beyond what you said, what are the educational interests of the state? Where can you find them?
Policies and bylaws and some.
Both of you are right. You said the statutes, you said the policies, and I like that combined answer because the policies really should come from the statutes. the interests of the state really are in the state statutes, and then you all are required to have policies that carry out the state statutes and don't contravene them. We'll talk a little bit later about whether it's wise to go beyond the requirements of the state statutes. But I'll put that to the side for a minute. So implement the educational interests of the state.
Yeah, I just would add that there is some constitutional element to that too. It's come up periodically in our state. Obligation to our children, given the
Yes.
fact that we're a city
Yes,
that has been traditionally underfunded,
yes,
that has come up historically in our state.
right. In terms of state funding and, opportunities that are provided through funding at the state level.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's,
So-
it's a good point.
Statute and the policies haven't kept up with the constitutional obligations necessarily. And it's a constant struggle in our state.
Right, because it might be difficult for you to actually implement some of those requirements, those state mandates. What about student discipline? What role does the board play, if any, in student discipline matters?
Honestly.
Okay,
Besides that.
setting policy,
This authority we delegate that to the superintendent. Expulsion hearings.
you appoint a hearing officer for expulsion hearings?
We do this.
Yes, okay, so a hearing officer, which a lot of boards do, and that's helpful because a lot of boards don't want to actually interact with students and families who are subject to expulsion. Do you do the same with residency and transportation hearings? Have you ever encountered a situation where a student is complaining about their transportation options and they challenge that?
Mostly that would come through the control transfer policy. There'll be issues with that. And it's also delegated as the last stop with the superintendent, I believe.
A hearing up, so
But it's gone back and
So one of the roles of boards is if a student doesn't actually reside in Bridgeport, they reside in another city or in another town, but they're going to school in Bridgeport, they would have the right, you would say you can't attend school free in Bridgeport. They would have the right to appeal that, and that would come before the board. Or unless you delegate it to a hearing officer. Same thing if a student is challenging their transportation opportunities, they could appeal that to the board. It could be delegated to the hearing officer. So the reason I'm saying this is that the board has what I call a quasi judicial function. Sometimes you actually serve as judge unless you delegate that role. There is one judge-like role that you cannot delegate. Does anybody know what that is?
Paper elections.
So that's actually not a judge-like role. That's a different thing. And the reason that's important to highlight that difference is because labor relations doesn't involve due process. So what I mean by that is the one thing you can't delegate is if you are going to terminate a teacher or an administrator. And the reason I mention that is you may want to know what's going on. I heard something's happening with this teacher. Dr. Avery, tell us what's going on. Can he tell you? No, why can't he tell you?
It's personal, it's individual, no?
No, because, well, there's two, one, we're expecting the grievance process.
Say that.
And ultimately, under the law, we have the final say. That's what's being debated in the legislature right now, is whether or not they're going to eliminate due process. But allow due process, because due process doesn't exist, because the board has the final say. That employee is terminated.
we need to maintain impartiality in the hearing process. And the only thing we allowed to use in that process is whatever they present to us at that hearing.
But I don't know how that's not giving us judicial power.
So that's right. So what happens is there's actually, when it comes to teachers and administrators, and only teachers and administrators, this isn't true for other types of employees like paraeducators or custodians, et cetera. Teachers and administrators have the right to a hearing before the board. They can choose an impartial hearing officer to make findings of fact and recommendations, but ultimately those findings and fact and recommendations would go to the board, and the board would get to decide whether to adopt them or not. And that's what's now under debate in the state legislature. They're trying to take away that authority of the board to have a say in what happens to teachers and administrators in their district, which I think would be unhelpful, right? So the reason you can't get involved unless and until you are sitting as a judge is there is teachers and administrators and any employee have a constitutional, federal constitutional due process right to be heard. Just like a judge sitting in a court can't get involved in the underlying investigation before they sit as judge, you can't get involved in knowing anything about what's going on with that teacher and an administrator unless and until there's a separation, a resignation, or it comes before you in a hearing. And I always like to point that out in these meetings because boards are often wondering, well, this is such an important thing. Maybe it's in the news, maybe your community is talking about it, and they might ask you about it. They might say, how could you not know about this? You're a board member. And what you're going to say is, I can't know about it because I'm like a judge. And if this eventually comes to me, I will be conflicted out. I can't even participate in that hearing if I know too much right now. It is my responsibility to stay impartial and not to know anything right now. So sometimes what happens is you'll get a postmortem, right? So a teacher will separate, they'll resign, or maybe there's some sort of an agreement. And then you can learn about what happened in an executive session. But if a teacher exercises their right to a hearing, you really can't know anything unless until that hearing happens.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm agree with you 100% and my colleague too. But this is Bridgeport, to put it this way, I'm gonna be to the point, this is Bridgeport. Situation happen like that, and let's see, on that Larry, that's his job, he's the, he's the one to take care of the situation. And I know parents or teachers that will come after us. Why happened this? Why this, whatever situation happened with that staff, be suspended or fired, whatever. I know my role is, that's not my job. I'm not responsible. Want to know why not contact that baby. That's my answer, and I would tell them right away, I know my colleague do the same thing. I say, listen, we're not involved. That's not our role in that situation. You have to contact that baby. So I say this to the staff or the parents so they can know. I don't want to think, oh, you don't know what's going on. Say, yeah, we know, but that's not our job, to discuss because that's private, they got your union, whatever, lawyer, whatever happened. We don't want to be part of that. So I would like to calm down a little bit sometimes, or parents or some staff, because they like to find out what's going on.
Right.
And I don't like to ignore nobody,
Right.
but I just give you that simple answer and trust me, they don't bother inform.
That's a good answer. I think different things are helpful for different people. That's not my job is a perfectly good answer until it is, if it comes to you in a hearing.
I made the decision.
Right, right. So I think that's helpful. And I understand that community members will come to you. So a lot of the purpose of this is to help you understand, or at least develop some language that you can use with your community to help them understand, no, that's not my job. You go to this person, here's the chain of command, here's who you can get that answer from. So those are your main, you hit the main ones. Setting policy. I think you mentioned setting policy, budget policy. Those are the big ones. So let's talk about policy for it. I know you all are going through your bylaws right now. And my understanding is that there are a lot of policies and a lot of bylaws and a lot of regulations that you're working through. Does anybody know what the difference is between policies and regulations?
Policy sets the same for the superintendent and the regulations.
Yes. And so who passes the policies?
We pass the policies and the superintendent develops the regulations to enforce those policies.
Yes. And to implement them, to figure out how do you do something. Where do the policies come from?
Traditionally, they come from the superintendent, but they can come from board members as well.
So the statutes.
Yes. So even before that, there are certain policies that are required. I'm sorry.
State statute.
Yeah.
State statute.
New ones.
There are certain policies that are required by law. Actually, many policies that are required by law. The statutes actually say the board must have policies on the following things. And guess what? The legislature keeps adding to that list.
You got the cell phones coming.
Every year, cell phones may be coming up, I was gonna say the latest one, now I'm thinking there's an even later one. So you may know that the school climate policy has changed, I think 11 times since 2000. And every time that changes, you have to modify your policy. You now have a required policy. I mean, this is a new one. The state actually wrote your policy for you. That's, I think, the only situation where the state wrote the Connecticut school climate policy. So you have to just take that and adopt it and implement it. I don't know if you heard, but early admission to kindergarten is being phased out, right? So if you want to continue it for the upcoming school year, that waiver process, the board has to adopt a policy in order to do that. So every year we're learning about new requirements around policies. So Shipman and Goodwin, you may or may not know, we have a model policy service. I know CABE has a model policy service for the two big ones. Our theory of policies is to have what is required and not much more. Why is that our theory? Has anybody explored different theories of policies? Why would it be important to have policies that are required and not go too far beyond that?
You have, so you're liability.
Exactly. If you expand the scope of your responsibility, I'm going to give a ridiculous example. If you say the Bridgeport, this should be every school district school, but if you say the Bridgeport Public Schools shall be the best school district in the state of Connecticut, right? Go implement that, Dr. Avery. Guess what? No school district can achieve that goal consistently, right? You're failing. You're setting yourself up to fail. What does that mean legally without going down the rabbit hole? What that means is if somebody were to sue you and they found that you violated your own policy, all of a sudden, that's negligence. That is a legal cause of action. So that's a silly example, but a better example is if you take the school climate policy, which talks about bullying and now it's called challenging behavior, and you say, you know what? We want to do better than that. We want to require that challenging behavior forms be filled out every time that there's a kerfuffle in the classroom, no matter what, no discretion. Is that going to happen? Is that even possible? That's not even possible. Maybe it's possible in one of your classrooms in one of your schools. But if you think about, and this is why working with the administration to understand the impact of what it is you may be doing with your policies is so important, because they will tell you, we can't implement that. And if they can't implement it, you're setting yourself up for what might be a successful lawsuit. It's hard enough, and you can feel free to disagree with me, to implement the policies that are required by the state. You know, I work with a lot of boards and it's a constant struggle there are unfunded mandates all over. It's a constant struggle to do even what they want you, what they're requiring you to do. So my advice has always been to just you have to implement what's required, right? You got to get those on the books. Our policies stick as much as possible to the letter of the law. And, you know, for example, who's familiar with the new library policies? Have you heard of those? Yeah. So there's new policies that I don't want to overwhelm you, but just last year, the state legislature passed a series of policies about challenges to library materials.
We implemented that last year.
Yeah, we revised our policy
Okay, good.
based on that new.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm sure Kate has the model policy. So regulations, we'll shift for a minute to regulations. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to say, sometimes it's advisable to have a policy that's not required by law to set expectations for staff, like for example, a code of ethics for staff, and to make sure that you're dealing with people consistently. Students, staff members, community members, because inconsistency is another legal problem. So those are the two big areas where policies are recommended. Regulations, you said, or you said, are, one of you said, regulations are to implement the policies, right? To carry out the policies. They are not to change the policies. They are not to come up with a different way of looking at things. They really are, policies can be long, they can be short. And they spell out how the administration is going to implement policies, particularly those that are very general in nature. So I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions about policies. And regulations can be administratively adopted and changed. And the reason why that's important is that they're more flexible. So if some change needs to be made in terms of implementing a policy, the administration can administratively change them without going through the board process. Now, if you see that a regulation is inconsistent with your policy, right, you have the right to say to the administration, hey, wait a minute, this is not what our policy says. You always have that right. But otherwise, regulations are really supposed to be carrying out the policy.
And in that case, if we see a regulation that's in contrary against our policies, we have the right as the board to instruct the superintendent. Should the superintendent not be amenable to this? The common sense, not the superintendent is, but it has happened in the past, where the superintendent has gotten bullheaded over a procedure that was not being followed. Policies say, oh, that's a procedure, that's my name, but we've got the right to instruct the superintendent, no, you've got to follow the policy and procedure that you're trying to implement is incorrect, and it will take a vote of 5 of 9. I think that makes such a direction and direction to change the procedure to reflect the policy.
Yes, yes. The key is, and I don't have your policies in front of me, but they're bylaws, because there are bylaws that speak to how administrative regulations and policies are adopted and changed. So you'll want to follow those bylaws. You'll want to make sure that those bylaws are in good working order. And you'll also want to make sure that the bylaws don't conflict with each other, because your bylaws are how you run yourselves. And it's important that you're all looking at the same thing. And that one person isn't saying, hey, there's this bylaw. Another person says, wait, but this bylaw says this. So that should be a priority, because otherwise you're going to confuse yourselves. And then it's hard to do what you just described if you have two different bylaws dictating two different processes for that process. Your bylaws are your rules, your own internal rules. Now I think does CAVE have model bylaws? We have model bylaws.
So we're currently using the model bylaw, Kate.
Okay.
They're not implemented here, but we're using that to update our bylaws to kind of model.
Yeah.
Kate's.
Yeah, sometimes if it's easier, one strategy that some boards use, if they have a lot of legacy policies or bylaws, is that they just repeal a whole series in one motion, and then they replace it with the model set. That's one strategy.
We're taking it.
Step by step. Yeah. Different boards do it differently. So why don't we go to a scenario just for fun? I don't know if I can flip to it on here. The presentation. Oh,
Okay, good, I mean.
I've just been ad-libbing, but
Okay.
a scenario. Well, you can start reading it. It's scenario 1, slide 8. While we're waiting for it to come up. Yesterday, the local paper published a front page story about a teacher employed by the district who was arrested for drunk driving. The article identifies the teacher by name and school. Okay.
Is it on?
Ah, perfect. Thank you. You need a copy?
This one you have.
There's two
There's
different
two.
versions.
You want to read
I got you. There's not money. Hold on.
Parents come to the next board meeting and during public comment, several of them address the board to express concern that this teacher must be fired immediately. A fourth parent who comes up to speak attacks the board for sitting there silently like bumps on a log and asks the board members what they're going to do about this bad teacher. So, has this happened before? You have a lot of public comment?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
There's an error.
they're coming up and they're really concerned. And they're going one after another is telling you, you gotta fire this teacher. What can you say?
Be quiet, we just listen to them, and then after that, they ring the staff, they will take care of that situation, you know. And when we in the board, we listen to them, that's all.
You're good. You're good. You know what to do.
If she says, we don't comment.
Comment in the board meetings. and
Good.
public comments.
Good. And just so you know, there are many reasons not to comment, but one of them, which you may not know, is FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Because if you start to engage in a dialogue off the agenda, you violated FOIA. And you can tell your community members, they might have wanted to come out and hear you talk about, that school over there, that somebody needed public comment, but they didn't know that that was going to be discussed. So FOIA is a big reason why it's important not to get into that kind of discussion. Can a board member, either in the meeting or outside the meeting, say, don't worry about it, we're gonna get rid of the teacher?
No.
Yeah, we talked about due process. That would be,
Yes, no.
that would be an issue quite literally for federal court. Because that teacher's due process rights would have been compromised. And, we've already been through this. Dr. Avery can't tell you anything about the situation. Let's try this one. You run into an acquaintance at the grocery store and she complains that her son, who is in 9th grade, has been bullied mercilessly in school. The parent reports that her son has also been the victim of discriminatory taunts about his disability, which usually happen during swim practice, which is especially concerning to you as your son is also on the swim team. She is concerned that nobody is doing anything to stop this. Of course, you want to help her, so you review the board's policies and identify a couple that may apply here. You email other board members and share what you have learned, asking for their feedback on what to do next. So, what do you think about this? Let's start with the first question. Was it a good idea, in hindsight, was it a good idea to email the board about this? Why not?
FOIA.
Okay, FOIA is one issue because anytime you email the board, unless it's exempt, for example, if it's attorney-client privileged, it's a public document. This one might be FERPA protected, but why else is it not a good idea to email the board about this?
Well, if we weren't giving the superintendent the authority to hear the expulsion hearing, expulsion as well.
Okay, yeah, that might compromise the due process of the student who is the bully.
In my case, I have that, and I got parents that come to talk to me about bullying, stuff like that. And like I said, I don't like to ignore my parents. That's what I'm here for. Just to defend the situation, maybe I can speak with the parent and try to, to talk and figure it out. If the situation is not my role, I would let them know that they have cabinet and they have a staff. They charge for each school. So he would let them know who's ever in charge of that school, and then they find out, what's going on in the school.
Yeah.
And just to bring the situation is very simple that I know me as a board, I can, let's say, I would wait. But it just depends how far, because I don't want to go involved and have the issues and, problems like that. But more than the time that they will have a cabinet, they really send the person in the school to figure out if it's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's the whole idea of chain of command. Your role can be to direct people to the appropriate place. Because some parents may have no idea how to even approach this. They might not know that they should email, the school guidance counselor or the principal or the assistant principal. And so your role is to know what the chain of command is and to help them out. I appreciate that sometimes you want to try to fix it. The thing that I would be concerned about is, what about the next parent? If the inconsistency, right? If the next family says, well, wait a minute, you fixed it for them. Why can't you fix it for me? then I think it might be harder to go with that's not my role, but here's the chain of command.
I always like to have the parent have a smile, trying to be sure they don't get stressed. And like you said, I agree with you 100%. And that really happened to me. And I said, okay, let me figure it out. Let me call you somebody that will help you.
Yes,
You know, and that's the way I stop. I say, and then I told Dr. Can you please call this parent? I give information, like email, the phone number, and he took the job. So I want the parent later, then the parent call me. Thank you. They really fixed it. They really called me. They ignored me. So I'm trying to figure
oh,
out.
that's perfect. That's perfect. And I like what you said about you should I do recommend if a parent comes to you like this, let them know who to call, but you can also give Dr. Avery a heads up.
Oh, yes.
Not the principals, that's not really your role. Your role should really be to talk to your one employee, who is Dr. Avery. Dr. Avery, I just ran into somebody, just FYI, be on the lookout for this. Because sometimes, and this is actually another issue, what if you run into this parent, you now know as a board member that this student is being bullied mercilessly. You say, go talk to the principal, and they never do, for whatever reason. Then what? Have you done your job?
I'm really so sorry because I told you because that happened to me. I always thought, do you speak with the teacher? I want to go.
Yes,
Okay, do you want to, if you feel the teacher don't help you, do you speak with the principal? If you don't feel the principal is not the way to, to help you in the way, and then you go to the superintendent's office.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
The chain of
Try
command.
to follow, the
Yep.
steps.
That's absolutely right. The reason why I suggest that you also call Dr. Avery is that if that parent, for whatever reason, doesn't go through that chain of command, any part of it, and harm comes to that student, I wouldn't want that to be on you. Because sometimes I think parents misunderstand what your role is as board members, and they might think, oh, I told a board member I'm good. They're going to take care of it. So you may say, that's not my role, and they may not hear it. So a best practice is always to let Dr. Avery know.
Would it also be advisable not to say, hey, we're gonna handle this, rather than say, I'm gonna take this I'm gonna send it to the superintendent? I think when you say I'm gonna handle this, it implies that you're gonna personally take care of the situation.
Right, I would not advise saying I'm gonna handle it. I think what you described is perfect. Here's the appropriate chain of command. Did you talk to the teacher? If not, you should. If the teacher doesn't do anything, then go to this person and then this person. You don't even have to tell. In fact, I wouldn't tell the parent that you're gonna call Dr. Avery. Because then again, they might assume that you're handling it. I would just do that. I would, again, I wouldn't tell them you're gonna do that. Just do it.
My model that I've done for the last 2 years since I've been a board member, I take information, I listen, and I let them know the best way of advocacy. I give them all the board members email, including Dr. Avery. I don't know if you guys saw these big ones that have been coming out the last couple of years, but I tell them, you send it to all the board members and Dr. Avery. And now you activate me as a board member to call Dr. Avery. And I can say, hey, listen, I saw an email, did you see it? That way I know that parent or that individual or that leader sent the information to the full board, made Dr. Avery aware of it, and now it's out of our hands because I tell them the best advocacy that I can be is I will not take away my vote from your child, from you or anybody when there's something that comes before the board. Because my advocacy is my best thing is sitting on this board and having my vote stand. If I know too much information, I gotta step down. So I tell them, send a whole email to the whole board and the superintendent. And then I can ask my superintendent, hey, listen, this came out to our attention. Did you see it? And then give that highlight to them. That way they're in clear communication with the people that they need to be. And it's his office and him.
Yeah, so I think that works well for certain issues that the board might be considering, particularly matters of policy or practice. I think when it comes to parents talking about their individual child, would you do that for that kind of situation? Or would you handle that differently?
Oh, no, I would always say that. That's my model thing is always say the same thing. It's send the board the information, including the superintendent. That way they will take care of it and they go about it their way because it has nothing to do with us as a board member.
Right.
I mean, I'm a huge community person, so I have a whole church, I have a whole church-based community. So many things come my way, within the board or out the board, and I just send it to
Right.
them.
So that is one way to handle it. And another way that's perfectly appropriate is the way we've been talking about, when it comes to an individual child, right? There are some issues that affect the school district more holistically. And the parent may or may not feel comfortable emailing the whole board. The way this scenario is set up is it's the board member has the acquaintance. They run into them, they say, oh, I know you, so I'm gonna tell you about this. If you say, email the whole board and the superintendent, they may or may not do it. You could say that. You could also say, and here's who you can talk to. And then you can also pick up the phone and call Dr. Avery. These are just different approaches.
Sometimes just depends on how is the situation with bullying, because they happen to me, and sometimes when I see the school, they're gonna do nothing, I see the stress of that parents, I call Dr. Russ, Dr. because it's 911, something's very, very things happen to the bullying, because just depends the situation. And he take care right away, because when I told him, listen, this is very bad, the parents out of control, so, it's just something just depend.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So when, just getting back to emailing the full board. Okay, another issue with that is you can have an illegal meeting by email. So if you email the full board, not only is it subject to FOIA, that email, but if even one person responds, you've had an illegal meeting. So that's another reason why I'm sure you all know you shouldn't be engaging in email dialogues back and forth. Now, what about following up? So you run into this acquaintance, you have your strategy. Do you put it on your to-do list? Oh, let me call Dr. Avery in 2 weeks to see what happened with my acquaintance and their student.
I don't need to call him because I know he will fix it. So I'll be okay. Trust me, I'll be okay because I know why, because that parent called me. It tell me, Mr. Benehan, thank you. They will call me from the main office and the thing else. And I very appreciate it. I know he and his team did his job. So I'll be okay with that.
Yeah, I'll handle it a little differently. I never follow up. I ask the parent, if you don't receive satisfaction, let me know. So then I don't need.
Yeah.
If I should follow.
Both are correct answers. You really shouldn't be involved at all. As I said before, you have one employee and that's the superintendent, and you evaluate your superintendent, things will bubble up. And you have to trust that your administration is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And if they're not, that will come to you. You'll have to deal with that in other ways. But you all are elected officials who are volunteers. I'm sure you all have very busy lives. You're not paid for this job. This is I really so respect and admire your public service. And it's almost a good thing that you don't have to worry about the day-to-day operations of the district, whether a student situation is being handled correctly, whether an employee situation is being handled correctly on a day-to-day basis. As a supervisory board, generally speaking, yes, but on a day-to-day basis, you have a lot of other things to worry about. That's not something that you need to deal with operationally, nor would you have the time.
I've got a question that's somewhat related. Came across a situation where I felt like I had to go beyond and make a report to DCF. Are we considered mandate reporters as board members?
I would say,
Because I heard on the side of the kid, I was reporting it anyway, but.
yeah,
this is the thought.
it's actually a good question. I don't know the technical legal answer to that, but I would. I mean, you can report to DCF. I can look into that, but I would if there's an issue. But also more likely,
We would need training.
If that's what you can follow up with.
yeah,
There is a mandate for training.
let me find out. I don't think board members are required to have training.
Because you're hearing information secondhand or thirdhand and not necessarily dealing with it, right? And so my staff, they're mandated reporters. And so if the teacher is involved, principal's involved, and they know about it, they report. And in that instance, you did too, but we also did, and it cleared everything up.
Right. Yeah, and as you know, I did not follow up.
You didn't follow up?
I did not follow up on it at all. I made the report and just left everything alone. Just the reason I'm asking is because if you consider the mandated reporter and it comes across to you as a mandated reporter, you're not supposed to rely on somebody else reporting it. Something comes to your attention, you got to report it, even if a staff member reports it to their supervisor, they're not in compliance with the law because they're supposed to report it then and then tell the superintendent.
Yeah.
That's just,
It's a good question and I'll follow up. I think it just doesn't come up that often because information doesn't usually
Usually
come
comes
to
to us.
board members first. It usually goes through the mandated reporters who are the school employees first, and then it may come to you next.
But what happened is that it was reported to us. We did our due diligence, but also reported to the board member. So we took the initiative to report it to DCF, which but he also reported it to me, which we had already did our business, but he took it a different step because he took what the parent gave him and he reported it.
Right.
So that's where it can get really muddy if you put yourself in that situation.
That's where I would call up the superintendent and say, did you report this?
yeah, and I did, but when it came to me, it came to me as they don't think anything was being done about it. So that was an extra layer. And I also told into that as well. All right, so let's jump off the subject before one of us slips.
I that's my experience. Sorry, did you go?
Well, I was gonna say, I will get your answer, but my guess is that we're not, because we're not employees.
Yeah.
We're not expected to be interacting with the kids. And so it's not part of our job. It's not part of our duties. It's something that may happen as it did to you. But it's not, we're not expected, whereas mandated reporters are expected to be aware of that stuff and run into that stuff, and when they do, to deal with it properly. So that would be my guess on that.
I think you're probably right, but I want to confirm.
Yeah, by all means.
It's a good question.
And the word DCF is something you have to be careful. Because you can say hello, and they can say, oh, they said they hate you. They are working like that. They are really have spiritual. They're that kind of people. They have to be careful how you deal with them in the situation. If I would have an experience and can be very, very, very bad, my job is. Then I'm that favorite. That favorite. This happened, this
Yeah.
situation, and I know they have a great team that will handle
Yeah.
the situation the way it's supposed to be. Because as we said, we don't get paid for this. You know, we do it voluntarily because we love it. We enjoy it. Of course, I will try to help that parent. Because I don't care how bad the parent is, I don't want to be involved because I don't know what's going on background, situation. I don't want to get involved because they will look back for the third state, the news run up became very fast for something small. So I will, he handled that situation.
No, it's a good question and it's, I'll just get the answer because we could speculate. The other thing is that mandated reporters have immunity from liability for reporting. And so you want to make sure you're a mandated reporter before you run off and call DCF. I'm just doing a time check because I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. Okay, we have till 8:30. All right. So I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said 8:30.
8:30 meetings, okay. Well, one question we didn't get to is, this is more of a conflict of interest question, kind of a nuance. So they're talking about, the parent reports that her son has been the victim of discriminatory taunts, which usually happen during swim practice, and your son is also on the swim team. And it's a bit of a red herring, this question, but the last one is, should you even be involved in this, given your personal connection to the swim team? And we took care of that earlier because you shouldn't be involved in it, period.
Yeah.
And that's even more reason. And it's just illustrative. This example is illustrative of you all have connections to the community, which is in large part why you are board members. All the more reason to leave this to the administration to handle. Because you're gonna run into these quote unquote conflicts, or at least these difficult positions for you. So what about, now I'm giving it away. I don't like the slides. What about individual board members? What authority do you as an individual have, if any? As a board member, you're an elected official. Do you have any authority?
Or, we're, we don't have individual authority.
That's right. Unless, yes,
Everything that I've been taught is we don't have no authority unless we're sitting down as a board, as a unit.
that's exactly right. You are a team. You have to function as a team. When you step away from the board table, you have responsibilities, right? Your responsibilities are to liaise with your community, to share information, to answer questions, but you don't have authority. You can't make decisions, you can't make promises, you don't have constituents per se, your own constituents. And so one thing that I've seen board members get into trouble with is when they make promises. Maybe it's not I promise I'll do that. And I'm not talking about campaign promises. I'm talking about you're speaking to members of your local community and saying, I'll get that done. You can't make that promise. And, you know, you can tell people I have one vote and it's up to the board. The board, and by the way, you're going to be on the losing side of the vote sometimes. You're going to be on the winning side of the vote sometimes, which is why it's always important to respect the vote. Because when you're on the winning side, you're going to want to better respect the vote. And similarly, you'll have to respect the vote when you're on the losing side. So the reason I mention that is because of this scenario 3. The board is convened in a public meeting and the topic of discussion is a bell-to-bell cell phone ban. You feel strongly that a ban is a bad idea for a number of reasons, ranging from safety to cost. You have polled your friends and neighbors before the meeting, and based on the results of that poll, you have concluded that most Bridgeport parents want their children to carry their cell phone around at all times. Although you share your views passionately at the board table, the board votes 6-3 to support the ban. You are outraged and you have let your constituents down. The next day, you and the other board members who voted with you published a co-authored opinion piece on your respective public Facebook pages, explaining why both of you wholeheartedly disagree with the majority vote and encouraging like-minded members of the public to start a petition to overturn the ban. This issue, after all, is a matter of safety and majority rule be darned. 5 board members who voted with the majority published a joint response to your piece on their public Facebook pages. Another board member writes the same comment on all the posts. I am formally calling for the censure of all board members who are using Facebook to have an illegal board meeting. Please like this post if you're with me. Did anybody do anything wrong here?
It's like,
Basically,
so familiar.
matter of magnitude, order of magnitude.
So what's wrong here? Who did what wrong? Who did what right?
The minority voices should have theoretically respected the vote. I've done the first one, but it has not been in violation of any laws or rules. But
In his opinion.
no, even the bylaws, I mean.
Yeah.
We have First Amendment protections for the minority voice to speak their work, speak their truth. And then you got the 5 board members who spoke their truth jointly and got together and discussed the issue of under board contention, which is a release. It may have been all right if one of those 5 board members was the board chair and came out with a statement affirming what the board did. The board voted this way because the board is the spokesman of the board.
Mhm.
And on your comment in here, the scenario, the only one I think violated and had basically the meeting in a sense, an illegal meeting was the 5. Because they were the majority and they formed a quorum.
Mhm.
Those 5 formed a quorum and that's an issue there.
Right, so minority voice, they deserve to be heard. Where can everybody be heard about these issues?
Theoretically at a board meeting.
Well, more than public comment, when you all sit around the table, your obligation is to debate things vigorously.
I call the question.
Well, right, so that, you mean ending debate?
Yep.
Right. But it's healthy, within reason. You may not want to go around and around for 4 hours, but it's healthy to hear from each other and to debate because you may all come in with one thought. But the whole point, by the way, of the Freedom of Information Act and debating in public and holding meetings in public is so that because the board is a deliberative body and the public has the right to hear you all engage with each other and to see how you may all change your minds depending on what other people are saying. So you may come in with one view and you may be swayed by other views. You may not be swayed by other views, but you can certainly speak your piece and anybody who's tuned in will hear you speak your piece. But then when the board votes, everybody, and this is not a law, this is not FOIA, this is just good board hygiene, good board teamwork. When the vote is done, everybody should respect that. As long as everybody feels they had an opportunity to say their piece and be heard. So debate all you want around the board table, be respectfully to each other, listen to each other. And if you want to communicate with people who feel strongly about an issue, tell them to come to the board meeting. Tell them to come listen to you speak. Tell them to make public comment. But theoretically, there shouldn't be a need for this after the fact public forum, posting about, I don't agree. I said this. I'm going to start a petition. So that's all good in theory, but tell me how it works in practice. What happens here? Are there challenges with that?
Nothing recent. I think that's probably best where we can say right now, for the matter of moving forward from where we were. Because where we were, it did become necessary because all voices were not heard. I mean, I was probably one of the biggest ones to go off on social media. But in my view, as long as my voice is heard and I'm on the losing side, I might explain my position a little more, but it won't be as much. Oof. I don't know if anybody disagrees with my.
Yeah, it's not productive to reopen all rooms here. We have been functioning productively for a year and a half.
Mhm.
But there was a time when we did not have those open discussions.
Mhm.
Let's just leave it at that. We weren't having that wholesome discussion at the table. So you can't compare the situations. And so now we are, everybody has a chance to speak and the process is working the way you think it should.
Well, that's great. So I'm here to affirm that that's the right way to go. I'm so glad that you've moved in that direction. I think the challenge too with even one person saying something, even if it doesn't have even if it just has a little oomph, but not a lot of oomph, is that then what if you want to say something? What if you want to say something? It's a matter of fairness in a way. And then all of a sudden, by the way, if a quorum of you start saying your piece, that could be considered an illegal discussion among board members because you're responding to him and you're responding to him and you're responding to, all of a sudden you're up to 5 and you've got a quorum. So I won't beat this dead horse, but I will say that it's my advice to leave it at the board table, make sure you're having that robust debate, make sure everybody's voices are being heard, and maybe make a pledge to each other not to go onto social media after a vote has been taken.
I could just, we're about to pass it by all night. Those need pretty good. I'm not looking at you, but you.
Yes, you will.
They're not recording in that. They're recording.
I think that, we safe to say that social media has not been used lately about. Social media has been used about issues that we're, fighting about with the state. On the issue of funding,
Yeah.
city about funding. So that's where the social media has come into play. board meetings. In the past, it was used
Mhm.
with regard to board meetings. That has not been an issue.
Anticipated to be an issue in the near future, hopefully.
Well, good. That's good news.
I mean, I can say just depend what's going on in the board education meeting. Because right now, as my colleague said, we have meetings and people, they see what's going on with everything in social media and just depend what's going on. That's where the situation start. Years back, it was a disaster. It was not respect, it was not communication, it was not nothing at all. We tried their best, we got the best. And people they know we would try, they're trying to be against us. And not us outside. And was the people that say, oh, why looking for it? What the board's doing, and then the people would communicate with us. It was bad, bad. I can say it was bad. And now people, they see the community, see everything what's going on, not only community, I'm talking the whole Connecticut. It's the whole Connecticut, not only Bridgeport. They see the change. We have, we're not perfect, but they know as my colleague, Trevor said, about funding now.
Yeah.
They know that's our job and that we're gonna be fighting on to the end to be sure, we funding the school the way it is.
Yeah.
I think the other piece is that we started doing a recap of the board meetings,
Mhm.
like a written recap of what took place at that particular meeting, like right after the meeting. So if you weren't able to catch the whole meeting, you can get the draft of that recap and you're still informed. And we didn't do that, until about 6 months to a year ago when we started doing that. So the community can kind of grab that and understand what took place at that particular meeting.
That's great. Great. Do you record your meetings?
Yes.
Yeah. I bet AI could spit that out, that summary. True too.
Well, it's not, it's a little difficult with the live stream. We can't use the YouTube or something for some reason. Which
Oh,
doesn't-
you don't-
Could, yeah,
Oh,
because
it's
some setting, I meant to mention.
We have a court reporter.
Oh, okay.
Yes, hi, thank you. I don't know where this fits, but I was just curious. This is Lamont Daniels. I'm one of the newest members. Can you speak to or share best practices around, board members speaking out on political issues? When is it your First Amendment? How do you distinguish the two? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So
Does that make
And then-
sense?
it does, and tell me if I'm not answering the question, but I'll start here. So I said before that each of you doesn't have any individual authority as an individual board member. But the other side of that coin is that you're all people, right? And so when you're not sitting at the board table, you can speak on issues, you can represent yourself. What you cannot do is speak as a member of the Bridgeport Board of Education or on behalf of the Bridgeport Board of Education, or I've heard this one a lot. As a member, a total non sequitur, as a member of this Board of Education, I think this, right? And so you're automatically signaling in saying that you are speaking on behalf of the board, you're representing the views of the board, you're making promises. So you can speak freely, but you can't speak as a member of or on behalf of the Bridgeport Board of Education. Does that make sense?
Yes, so can you give an example, when would be appropriate? I know we just passed a board resolution and I voted no, but members of the board could speak to it. So just distinguishing the two.
So do you mind if I ask you to give the example?
The resolution.
Yes,
was-
they can speak to it there.
The resolution was on, the board,
So
supporting some legislation of the Capitol.
Okay, so the board passed a resolution supporting legislation at the Capitol. I'm going to assume you disagreed with the resolution and you wanted to speak out, Mr. Daniels.
No, not me personally. So no, right, I get it to your point around if the to your point just mentioned while I oppose it, hey, if the vote passed, it passed. So I know just from experience, I'm not gonna say anything publicly, but just so given that example, can the board members say on behalf of the board, to your point, or distinguishing First Amendment right, that as an individual? Does that make sense?
There's a resolution and then what would a board member want to say?
So we might
That.
draft testimony and said the Bridgeport Board of Education
Support system.
Yes, okay. So yes, that is fine because the resolution, and it depends on what the resolution says, but if the board has voted and approved something, I would suggest that the resolution say something like, and delegates authority to the chair to draft a statement to the state legislature conveying the Bridgeport Board of Education's support of this testimony. That's perfectly appropriate. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think I just wanted understanding just how that part works. I'm not that familiar with that.
Yeah, okay, so what I've seen done, because it's very difficult to draft something as a board, to draft by committee. The easiest way to do that is you would pass a resolution saying, we support this legislation. We delegate authority to Ms. Perez to write testimony on behalf of the Bridgeport Board of Education, conveying the following points. We support this legislation because 1, 2, 3, 4. You're not going to sit there and draft it, but you are giving the chairperson authority, which is appropriate, to draft it on your behalf. And the problem is, it's hard to edit it after that. So if you wanted to review her testimony and provide feedback, it's hard to do that in a way that complies with FOIA. You can't do it over email and I'll provide feedback. I suppose she could email it to the board and say, call me if you have any real concerns, but you also want to avoid a serial meeting where one of you is calling her and another one of you is calling her and it's conflicting. And then she's stuck because she's saying, well, you told me this and they told me that and they told me that. So the easiest way to do it is the way I described.
Yeah, I would like to describe the pre and post resolution way that I testify, I'm going to give it a little more clarity. Before the resolution passed, that we were supporting these bills in the board. My testimony would begin. My name is Joseph Scala. I am the vice chair of the Bridgeport Board of Education. I am testifying on my own behalf and the opinions on my own. And then I would launch into the testimony and I would support the wealth tax. And now that the bill is, now that the right, now that the board has passed the resolution to support it, I now begin my testimony. Joseph Scholarly, vice chair of the Board of Education, testifying mostly on my own behalf. And then when I get to the part with the bill, that's why the Bridgeport Board of Education supports.
Okay, so I'm glad you gave that example because it depends on whether you have been granted the authority to say that last part. Typically, it would be the chair that's given the authority to speak on behalf of the board. Or you could say, and anybody who wants to speak on behalf of the board in their testimony can do so, as long as they adhere to the following points. It's up to the board how you want to handle that. But what if,
Resolution says the Board of Ed supports those bills.
Mhm.
Explicitly.
so
To the chair.
it's
Board of Ed's-
the Board of Ed, the point about the chair was, and authority is granted to so-and-so to testify on behalf of the board. It sounds like you didn't say that. It's just the Board of Ed. Of course,
Right.
I did in the meeting recommend the president of legal to clarify if you want to, I don't care if you didn't. No, I did.
But
Yeah.
it says explicitly the Board of Ed supports these bills.
One of the examples.
So by saying that it's testimony, you're not doing nothing other than saying what the resolution says.
which you can do. And so actually, that's a great suggestion. You could say, hi, I'm speaking on my own behalf. Here are my views. And now on behalf of the Bridgeport Board of Education, I'd like to call the legislature's attention to the Bridgeport Board of Education's resolution saying X and read the resolution.
So everyone's
Period.
reading the same thing,
Yes.
or no?
Yes, if you're speaking on behalf of the board, you should all just read the resolution and not say
Right.
anything more. Because otherwise, if you say something more, you may not agree with what her rationale, right? I know it's a little bit persnickety, but unless you've
Mhm.
delegated authority to all of you to speak about whatever you want to on behalf of the board, you've all passed one resolution, so it's safe to read that. You can say what you want yourself. But when you're speaking on behalf of the board, I would advise reading the resolution. Does that work?
Oh, that's clear. I don't know what the practice is, but just appreciate you, giving best practices, which I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, there's no one right way to do things. It depends. I mean, there is, but there's a lot of different right ways to do things is the point. And it depends on what works for all of you. So given that you've passed this resolution, that's how I would go. If you were doing it over again, you could have thought about, well, who's going to speak on our behalf and what are they going to say and put that in the resolution. You could have explicitly delegated authority to each and every board member to say anything in support of it that they want. I wouldn't recommend that. I think that's too open-ended, but there are different ways to handle it. If you wanted to say something, if the board wanted to say something beyond, is the resolution a couple sentences? Is it short?
The very short paragraph, it's
Yeah.
basically 2 sentences.
So if the board, if you wanted to provide testimony on behalf of the board, that's, let's say, a page long, that's where I would have said delegate authority to somebody, like probably the chair, to prepare that testimony on behalf of the board, consistent with the board's perspective on this legislation. And then Ms. Perez could have read the testimony.
And what about having the superintendent, relay the resolution on behalf of the board?
100%, that's another way to go. And we delegate authority to the superintendent to prepare testimony on behalf of the board, conveying the board's perspective. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the good question. All right, ready for another scenario? Actually, this is so funny. You just did this scenario. It's very similar. So recently, 3 board members have become very concerned about the new school climate policy the General Assembly has required boards of education to adopt, and wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Education as members of the Bridgeport Board of Education to lodge a complaint. Some of the other board members do not agree and like the new policy. These board members heard about this letter and were outraged that the 3 board members did not let them know about the letter in advance. So we just talked about this. I don't think we need to belabor it, but the point is those 3 cannot write a letter as members. They're not even saying on behalf of, but it's not appropriate to invoke their membership in the Board of Education in a letter like this without the authority to do so. They could write a letter as citizens and say, we don't like this. But once they say we're writing a letter as members of the Bridgeport Board of Education, they're suggesting that they represent the interests of the board.
I don't like that. I don't like that because I don't like when they say the board members. But I'm like, okay, why you say board members? I'm not going that. I never signed that. I never wrote that. I never see that. So my name is there and I'm like, I know. If you want to go straight to that board member and say the name of the board member, or you communicate with that board member. Do not say board members because I'm not part of that
Right.
thing. And I think, trust me, they know when they put my name there like that. No, if it's not coming word of we are agreeing or coming from that player, that there is a different guys. I'm saying if there's we let them know in advance, I'm okay. But when they do that, because we have experience that, I'm not flip. I said, my name is not gonna be out there without permission and I never given permission for that. I never.
Yeah, and that's exactly, so what's important here is that everybody should play by the same rules. And here in this scenario, they're not even putting everybody's name on it. They're just putting their own names on it, but they're writing to the commissioner as members of the Bridgeport Board of Education. If I'm the commissioner receiving that letter, I'm thinking, oh, the Bridgeport Board of Education doesn't like the school climate policy.
Yeah.
The suggestion that that's been discussed and, passed is incorrect, which is why it's so important to have your chairperson serve as your chief spokesperson. That does not mean, by the way, that your chairperson gets to decide what to say.
Thank you. Not because of her, because it happened to us before. And the chair sent an email on behalf of as the chair and didn't tell us anything about that letter and sent a letter to the state. And, you know, a lot of things that are happening now is because of that such letter that not even the state people knew about.
So on that point, the chair has no special authority to make decisions, which should come as a relief, because that's a lot, that's too much responsibility and power. That's no one person should have that. The chair has no special responsibility to make decisions on behalf of the board. The chair has certain very important responsibilities, but making decisions on behalf of the board is not one of them. The chair has one vote like the rest of you. But it's important to remember that the chair is your spokesperson, meaning they can speak the truth of the board, right? What the board has voted on, you can convey, but you can't convey what the board has not voted on, what the board has not even considered, or something that's opposite or contradictory to what the board has voted on.
That's why I was trying to note 3 times in the last point that we were talking about, the last number 3, that was one of the suggestions that was brought to our attention with Mr. Levon Daniels' question was, an example was given by one of the city employees saying that the city council does it like this. And what it did is make a letter and all the board members sign and have that as a resolution that is written down and everyone signs it individually.
Mhm.
And that's the resolution that is clearly written down and then we all agree on that.
Mhm.
That was one of the suggestions that came out from that meeting.
Mhm.
It wasn't done like that, but nevertheless, that's what was said. I put it in my testimony. You said exactly the words that you used, where the board, agreed on these things. And I just mentioned each one of those that we agreed upon that we supported because of the advocacy we've been doing for the last, few months now.
Yeah, having the letter written in advance and then voting to adopt it and then signing it is another way to go. The challenge there is if you have a letter, then everybody picks it apart in a public meeting, right? That it's just a matter of what works best for you because you can't have any free meetings to workshop that letter. That's the challenge of being a public agency. So different boards do it differently, but that's a perfectly fine way to go. If somehow you've had a discussion as a board in public, you delegate responsibility to the chair to write the letter, and then you come back at your next meeting and you look at the letter and you say, yes, we vote to adopt this. That's one way to do it.
The reading, I'm going what it said, it looks so familiar. If the commissioner received that letter, it's something that the commissioner is supposed to contact the chair and ask the question because coming from the board. They're supposed to, or is
No.
she,
There's no obligation on the part of the commissioner to make that call.
does she ignore the letter or what's gonna happen? That's my question, what's she gonna do about it? Is to receive the letter?
It's not what the letter's about. I mean, in this example, it's to lodge a complaint about a policy,
Yeah, yeah.
right? About a statute. I don't know that you can complain about a statute, right? That would be more advocacy for the legislature. If it was a complaint about, not a law, but a complaint, for example, about something that was going on in your district. First of all, I wouldn't go to the commissioner with that. I'd go to your superintendent and figure it out here. But I think what you're asking, so what can she do about it? Not much, because it's about a policy. Again, if they're lodging a complaint about something that could be actionable, then I would think or hope that it would come back to the superintendent and the board. So the board would become aware of it because there would be some investigation, there would be steps that would be taken.
Yeah.
So there would be opportunities for the rest of the board to say, hey, wait a minute, this wasn't us. We didn't lodge this complaint.
I feel like it's not respectful. I feel like, and then, like a slap in the face, like there's no communication because you're trying to go over the chair, you gotta go over the superintendent when you can figure out and fix the problem home before you take it, take it out. I know it could be resolved. So I don't feel like that's not, it's not respectful, it's not good way, because like I said, the news run fast and people's watching every second
Yeah.
what we do.
Which is why this kind of discussion and getting all on the same page is so important. This shouldn't be me telling you what to do. This should be you telling each other how you respect each other to operate. With my guidance. And it sounds like you all are on a good path. I'm gonna do a time check. Yeah, all right.
She got it.
So, let's talk about committees for a minute. What do you, I'm gonna hide the slide for a minute. So how many committees do you have?
Three standing committees.
Freestanding.
Do that.
And they're not committees of the whole, are they?
No.
Oh, the Personnel Search Committee is a committee of the whole. It's just a
So if that's a
short committee.
six committee then.
Okay. So, what do you all see as the role of the committees? You do a lot of working committees?
Yeah.
Okay,
Recommendations to the board, fully vet the issues and cut it up as much as possible before it gets to the board, so the board has little work left to do by the time it's presented to the full.
right, exactly. It's really, because it's hard to get work done in a board meeting, so it's really to take on the work of the board and make recommendations. Yeah, that's exactly right. And committees, of course, are themselves public agencies. I'm sure you all know that. And have to comply with FOIA. We talked about policies. I have a scenario in here about committees that I wanted to go to. Policy committee is planning a meeting to talk about the board's bylaws. Board bylaws have been a hot topic among the board members, and although you are not a member of the policy committee, you want to attend their meeting to hear what they have in mind. Another board member who is not on the policy committee plans to join you. So here are the questions. Is it a problem if a quorum of the full board attends a policy committee meeting? Why not?
When we did.
It's gotta be the right. You're correct. However, where do you all sit?
In the meeting,
Yes, in the policy
they're
committee,
usually together.
At the table.
So
At the table. so the non-met members and the
You
policy.
should have the committee members at the,
Head of the table.
facing the screen here.
And they're all at the same table.
And then on the
You-
outskirts.
Because it's televised, so the head table would be where the committee
Yeah.
is. And then it'd be in a U shape.
Mhm.
So non-members would
It
be
is
sitting on the
side.
sides.
With the cabinet.
May I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
So here's the,
Yeah, I just want to kind of.
I know where she's going too.
I know where she's going, right? So I'll hand it off a little
Yeah.
bit by step.
I
by
want to
step.
hear this.
Why Mr. Woodson is correct is because even if this meeting the committee meeting has been properly noticed, and even if another entity notices a meeting, forum of the board is still allowed to pretend under FOIA, because that means, say if we go to the city council and there's 5 of us there, and we go as a properly noticed meeting of the city council, and the 5 of us there, and the 5 of us speaking does not violate FOIA because that was a properly noticed meeting on the FOIA. So the committee functions the same way. It's properly noticed on the FOIA. All the things we're gonna be discussing is properly noticed.
you are mostly correct. Okay, here's the nuance. Here's the challenge. The challenge is when a quorum of the board attends a policy committee meeting and sits around the table and engages, do they speak?
They do.
As pa-
Yes.
Let me
They-
let me make one other thing clear. Only committee members are allowed to vote. And committee members speak first, non-members are allowed to speak after committee members have spoken. And participate, but not vote. So the only committee members are allowed to vote at the meeting.
You're still not gonna like what I. Yeah. So the voting isn't dispositive, and here's why. It's what I said before. The board is public agencies are deliberative bodies. So just as important as the vote is the debate and the discussion. It's a meeting of a public agency, whether or not you take a vote. So if you have, and let me ask you this. You said committee members talk first and then board members talk second. Is that part of a public comment period?
No.
It is a FOIA issue because it is a quorum of the full board meeting to discuss board business. So here's how I would, it's not a no, you can't do this. Here's how I would suggest you do it. There are a number of solutions because I don't like to create problems. I like to create solutions. There are a number of solutions. Solution one, you have your meeting. So let's say we're sitting around this table. Members of the policy committee sit around the table, and those members of the board who are not on the policy committee sit in the gallery with members of the public. They won't be on television, but they shouldn't be because they're not a member of this public agency. If you have a public comment period, they can speak during public comment, but they can't participate in the policy committee's discussion. You don't like that option.
We don't
We
have
don't
a
go
public,
public
we don't have a public comment period.
There it is.
Oh, but you can.
You could
We
create
have to
one.
change bylaws.
No, but they add it on the, you just have to add it to the agenda.
May I ask before we go any further, has there been a definitive FOIA ruling on this?
I probably, it's kind of black letter law under the Freedom of Information Commission's rules.
Not for the, keep going.
I have another suggestion. Do you have a bylaw outlining how many people can be on a committee?
No, but from what I was, my understanding was that 3 is an odd number, so for a vote sake, you get yes, no, and you can pass. 4 end of the tie, if there is a tie, and then 5 would be a form of the board. So that was the understanding that I had. So 3 is kind of where we stand with committees.
Right, and so if it's a quorum of the board, the challenge there is that things end up being a done deal if they make it through committee, so. Because I was gonna say, one option is just make your committee bigger. Because then when you notice the meeting of the policy committee, they can all appropriately participate in the discussion. Is it the same people who come every week? Or whenever
Be
you.
really active.
Yeah, we all, most of them joined.
Well, when you say that it's a done deal, under our bylaws and policies, or policies, I think it is bylaw. There's no decisions that are made on committee
Right.
level. It's always at the full board member, full board meetings. There's no decisions except to move into the full board. There's no decisions
Right.
made.
What I meant by done deal is if the policy committee recommends it and it's a quorum of the board, then the people who are left, they know they're gonna lose if they vote against it. Not always. Maybe you have a split vote or you don't even have a decision on the committee. That's some of the concerns that I've heard around having a quorum of the board on a committee. Is that you have a quorum of the board working on something, and so then when it goes to the board, what's the point? I don't think that that's the end of the road, because the board members may give you feedback, the other, 4 may give you feedback and say, wait a minute, did you think about this? We have questions, and then they send it back to the committee. So I don't think that that's really an issue. But that is a problem. That is an issue under FOIA. So there are, as I said, there are 2 ways to handle that. And it sounds like there may not be a much of an appetite for my first suggestion. So you might want to think about the second suggestion, which is making them part of the committee so that they are officially, right, like appropriately there.
I think, look, Kate, we brought this up in one of our trainings. Basically, it was quickly like kind of talked about and then we moved on to something else. So they basically said that if our members are participating on committee as non-committee members, if members of the public, which means that that opens it up to the public to also debate on issues. He said something to that effect, basically. But we didn't really go into it because we kind of moved on quickly. And I think it was more of a like, hypothetically, if the board members participate, that means that, the mom coming in also participate.
Right. Well, I think that the theory is right, which is that they have to participate on par with members of the public,
Yeah.
not as board members in that circumstance.
And I believe, the historical context that I would disagree slightly with your depiction, and you could disagree with me if I'm wrong when I lay this out. When I came on the board, there were 8 or 9 committees. And because there were 8 or 9 committees, they had trouble getting quorum for a committee. So they had 3 to a committee simply to not require too many people to get a quorum. So by only having 3 committees, it would be easier to have 5 on the committee. You know, the move to 3 committees occurred during the Troubles, as we Irish like to refer. And during the Troubles, we went to 3 committees with less people on, period. But coming out of the Troubles, it would be possible to have 5 on the committee. But we'd still, I think, have to deal with your public participation, because we often will have more than 5 people coming to a committee meeting who want to participate.
Board members,
Yes.
yeah.
So I think that we'd still have to wrestle with this concept of letting the public participate in a discussion at a committee meeting in order to cover the FOIA obligation that you're describing.
Just to be clear, though, I don't think you can do that. So I don't want, we don't necessarily need to go down this rabbit hole. But it doesn't solve the point from the FOIA problem to allow the board members who are participating as members of the public to participate in the debate. I'm not sure what was said. That I think is still the FOIA problem. So.
I see that's problematic too.
But, you know, the board, what I would tell those other board members who want to be part of the discussion is they will be part of the discussion, just not at the committee level. They'll be part of the discussion because every committee decision gets brought to the board for final approval. Or maybe you rotate committees. Maybe if you're not on policy this year, you'll be on policy next year. But I think it's a matter of just being vigilant around, you're on this committee, you get to participate in how the sausage is made. And if you're not on the committee, then you get to be part of the ultimate decision. And then if you want to be on this committee next year, great.
Now do you say, oh, there's a change here, this is the Bradfield. I know, the 9-1 member for us, we are the one who always come to the meeting. I'm one of them. Doesn't matter, give me rain, snow, I show up. And I'm not be part, I'm be part of the committee. As you say, we got 3 people sit down and on the side. Of course, with the permission, with the chair, then, you know, recognize the person to speak. But the other board members, then I part committee that don't vote, you know, we can hear them, you know, stuff like that. And after that, we bring it to the full board. But now they think like, you know, change those board members cannot be part of the committee. That situation is, and another word I don't like. Why? Because as a board member, as an elected official, I like to know what's going on in the meetings, because I know in the end of the day or the next meeting, we have to discuss and we have to bring it to the board, to a full board to discuss, you know, and not be part of the, or not be on one of the meetings, you know. It's a little difficult for me to accept it. Why? Because I care. I just want to know what's going on in each committee, you know, to see what's going on. If I'm not part of the committee, of course, I'm not going to vote. But at least my voice can be here, you know, they can hear my voice. What was my opinion? I'm not saying you have to listen to me and do what I'm saying, but at least they can know my opinion as a board member, as a elected official, you know, because people, like I said, should watch us every second, you know, and not be part.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to be, because that's okay, I'm not be part. So why have to vote? So I'm not, that's not the thing. I mean.
So I
excuse
think.
me, nothing like that.
Yeah, so I think the answer for you, with, you know, we're addressing that concern is you can still come, you can listen, and you can make your voice heard if you add a public comment period. The thing you can't do, though, is engage in the deliberation, in the discussion. Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, no, Marissa.
Thank you. So I just kind of wanted to lay out, so I understand completely what's happening and all of that, but I'm struggling with I feel like we, especially in the policy committee, with the way that we've been operating, we've actually created some efficiencies with actually having board members being part of the discussion and actually helped make our board meetings much more effective and free flowing in terms of not actually having the real debate really has taken place during the committee meetings and not so much the board meetings. And it almost seems like we're kind of stepping away from that and saying, no, the full-blown discussion with all board members should be happening in the board meetings. And I just kind of wanted to highlight that it's gonna cause some back and forth, some additional back and forth, especially if we're editing a document. I mean, at the end of the day, we're gonna follow the law, but just kind of wanted to highlight that it might not be exactly correct, but it did create some efficiencies from at least my perspective.
I really appreciate that comment. I think it's interrupting efficiency is, I shudder to think that that's what this would do, because you guys need efficiency. You need to move through this. You need to review your policies and do it quickly. So I'm definitely not trying to throw roadblocks in the way of that. I'm trying to protect you from a complaint around FOIA, and FOIA is so tricky. It's a great thing because people should be able to see what you do. They should be able to hear what you do, but it's also tricky in this regard. And so I want to help you with options. I have lots of options. One option is make the policy committee a committee of the whole. The challenge there is then you need a quorum. Then you need 5 people to run a meeting, right? So you have options. I think the question for all of you to think about is which one will work best for you. You can make your committee bigger. You can have people sit on the sides who are not on the committee, so they hear everything that's going on. They can make their voices heard during public comment. I mean, those are really, really the options. The legal piece I can't fix for you, you know, unless you want to petition to change the FOIA law, the Freedom of Information Act. So I think you all will have to just consider which option you prefer. And not every committee has to be large. Maybe it's just the policy committee for that efficiency reason that you just described, which is a really valid point.
And I will just say, I think this is probably just happening because we are in the process of revamping our bylaws. And I think that's just the situation on how things are unfolding right now. But I thank you for your input and your comments.
I was just saying, I think when you talk about how you approach policy development through your firm, it's all about less is more. So when you start doing that, you put yourself in a position to where you can make a sound decision, but you have a little wiggle room as well. And so this is pretty much where we are now. Just what's going to work best for this board, because different years has different perspectives. A year or two ago, it was totally different,
Yeah.
the dynamics of what the board was dealing with. And now it's different, but just hearing what you said about committees are supposed to be, you know, working with administration to kind of fine tune the policies. You take that back to the full board for deeper discussions. You know, most of the work is done at committee, but some of those high level things need to be brought to the committee, as the committee chair will do, and then have that discussion at the meeting with everybody. Then you vote. So that's the clarity, or if it needs to be pushed back down to committee for a little bit more clarity, then you can do that. So again, I think but a lot of times we do things inconvenient because we want more people to have voice in the topic. And that doesn't work that way legally sometimes. And I think that's what hit us in the face now. We're doing things, but it's not legally done correctly. And eventually it's going to come back and bite us because we felt collectively as a board that this is what we need to do because this is us.
Yeah.
That's my say.
Yeah, I'm having somewhat of a visceral reaction to this whole conversation because the purpose of FOIA is to keep information in the public. The whole purpose is to make sure everything is exposed. by having these committee meetings with 5 board members, by the way, the city council follows the same premise and a lot of other people, and a lot of other bodies as well, will allow people to ask questions at the meetings. I'm the first one to draw a complaint when we try to hide something from floor. I'm the first one to file as a board member. If we get out of line, I will file. And I don't have 4 of them. But to do this and to, or that's why I asked about case law.
Yeah.
I would like to see a case, I mean, consequences. So at an open meeting, you had extra board members speaking live on YouTube, being live streamed, discussing things publicly, not hiding it from anybody. That does not seem to violate the spirit of the FOIA law, which is to be public.
Yeah, so here's the funny thing about FOIA. Here's where this all comes from. It's all about the notice piece. So if I'm a member of the public and I'm looking, which meeting do I want to go to? Oh, I'm not going to go to the policy committee meeting because that only has 3 board members on it. They're going to be talking about, they're going to be workshopping something, and then it's ultimately going to go to the full board for debate. I'll watch the full debate later on when it goes to the full board. Little did I know that the full board was sitting at the policy committee meeting debating that very issue. That's the FOIA issue. It's about the notice to the public. The public isn't on notice that the full board was going to have a discussion about this policy.
How about another solution in noticing our committee meetings that all board members are welcome, will be attending or welcome to attend and participate in the discussion.
Well, then you're effectively.
Participate in the discussion.
Yeah.
If it's
No,
a notice.
Right, because the people we notice, they'll notice it, and they still keep the same rules of the committee members voting and what have you.
Yeah.
And effective notice, because it's been something that's been done by you for ever since I started watching board meetings, city council meetings, because we don't
So-
want to deal with, we don't want to damage the efficiency we got, because especially policy, budget, and all that. We don't want to be kicking these things back and forth, because if Mr. I'm gonna use the treasurer for an example, disagrees with something on the board member, and there's only 3 members there. Well, we could have heard input from everybody else and come up with something that fits with what the majority would be. It makes no sense to, if 3 board members to go unanimously, and then you got 6 board members that would be totally amended.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate. Let's have this argument on the board. I heard quoted. That, you should go to the committee meeting if you want to have your input. Well, I'm not on that committee. This is an all volunteer board. Why do I have to go to every committee meeting?
Right, to get, okay.
And, you know, I resented being told that at one point.
Right.
But I didn't have time to go to every committee meeting and participate in each of those discussions. Or go back and watch every committee meeting on YouTube
Mm.
to know every issue versus go to the general board meeting
Mm.
where I had a right to ask questions. And I was being told, we don't have time for your questions here.
Right.
Because we discussed it at the committee meeting.
Mhm.
And my attitude was, and just because I couldn't make the committee meeting and ask the questions there, you're telling me I don't have time, I don't have the right to ask questions here. And I'm playing devil's advocate.
Right, yeah.
That strikes me as dead wrong.
Right, and to your
I'm an
point,
elected board member, I have a right to come to the full board,
Mhm.
where I have a right to ask the questions I want to ask. Just because I couldn't make it to a committee meeting that I'm not on.
right, and that's in that scenario doesn't apply, because you still have the right to debate at the full board meeting, either way. It's not taken away when it comes to the board meeting, because we do make amendments on the floor. to things that pass through committee, and we do discuss it thoroughly. Sometimes even the people at the committee meeting that have discussed it rehash the discussion because they think it might be an important part that public or somebody wasn't told, or it might be a 2-to-1 push out of the committee and the one person wants to try to get another shot of getting an amendment to whatever came out of committee and it gets further discussed. So I don't see this conversation ever being cut off at the current time and in the future going forward, if the board operates how it should, that debate will be staunch whether something's been cut up in committee or not.
So I'm not sure we're gonna solve this tonight. You know, that happens to be the way that the law works. I've given you a couple ways to approach it. I want to get back to what you said, Dr. Avery, which is when it comes to policy, I think just the policy committee in particular, one important thing to keep in mind is if you're spending 15 hours on one policy that's mandated by law, you're probably spending too much time. If you're spending 2 hours, probably spending too much time. You have the luxury of looking at model policies that have been created for you based upon the law. And as I've said before, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. You can't do less. And I generally advise against doing more. I also advise against deviating too much from the language of the statute, because again, that's when you run into trouble. So for better or worse, a lot of your policies are just, you're going to take them. If you're having robust debates about a policy, it's probably about a policy that's not required by the law. That's your own local policy. I would suggest spending, talking about efficiency. I would suggest spending your time on those local policies that you may want to repeal or that you may want to revise. But all those ones that I would start with the ones you have to have. I wouldn't spend so much time on them because you don't really have a lot of wiggle room. I would make sure you don't have policies that are in conflict with each other or multiple policies on the same topic. And so if you're looking for efficiencies, I think that's probably the best way to get them, as opposed to including everybody in the board at the policy committee level so you can have the 15-hour debate about policy, if that makes sense. I've seen it. You're definitely not alone. Many boards spend a lot of time debating policies that are required, talking about whether there are ways to tweak it, what makes the most sense. Again, the challenge is that you may run into problems when you do tweak it because it may not be compliant, or it may do more than your administration is capable of implementing. So that's the policy. No, I don't want to cut off debate on that. I know that's a big issue for you all, and I'm happy to keep talking about it.
Committees combined.
I think the clarity needs to be the board chair and the other come back and visit with exactly how that needs
Everybody gets
to play out, because right now practice is not, conducive to protecting the board members. And I think that's our job, is to be able to make sure that we do that. You can change it temporarily until they re-adopt policy that's going to address the issue, so.
Just for clarity, because I apologize, I had to take a business call in my business. My line of work is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think we get to this, what was the main question? Because I want to make sure I understand all this discussion over that scenario. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
just talking about how policies, how committees operate versus the full board. And it sounds like this may need to be an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
So I have a lot, I don't know if you all have questions on FOIA. That was kind of the big one. Oh, I do want to touch on this. Text messages, they are public records. They can be FOIA'd. If you get a FOIA request for your text messages, you do have to turn them over. And that's why, and it's easier said than done, try to limit substantive conversations over text. Try to eliminate it, actually, but you also can't, I know a lot of boards do this, but you could potentially have an illegal meeting over text. And if I've had a board go to the FOIA commission because somebody FOIA'd the text messages and realized that a quorum of the board was discussing something on the text chain. So just a word of caution about that. So I would email, same thing over email. You can have an illegal meeting if a quorum of the board has an email discussion. And then records requests. So people tend to be more casual in text messages, so sometimes it's embarrassing if you are FOIA'd and you have an embarrassing text message. The other thing is sometimes you have to, the district receives notice of a lawsuit, and have you ever received a legal hold notice to preserve all your emails and text messages and documents? So it's easier to implement that if you do all your board business using your Bridgeport Public Schools email address. So long story short, I suggest using your school district email address for board business and limiting use of text, avoiding use of your personal email address and business. Okay, so we just talked about that. Any other questions about FOIA?
I believe most of the board have gone through training. I haven't yet because yeah, we got a few.
Okay. And then, it's 8:21, so I'm going to keep you on time. I have one more scenario about communication and information sharing. I also want to leave time for questions, so maybe we'll do this one, and then if there are any other questions, I can take those. Some board members are more engaged than others, and they ask the superintendent and other administrators, like cabinet members and principals, for a lot of information. Not all of these requests or the information provided in response to them make their way to every board member. In addition, the superintendent is receiving complaints from some principals that they are spending all of their time creating paperwork for and meeting with board members and don't have time to deal with urgent matters at their schools. At last night's board meeting, one board member stood up and pounded her fist when she saw that another board member reviewing a budget spreadsheet that she had never received. So let me ask you this, because I'm of the mindset that if it's not broken, we don't need to fix it. But what is your protocol for information requests and sharing on this board?
You should go to the superintendent for information request.
As opposed to approaching individual cabinet members or administrators.
And we're currently in the process of tweaking it to protect the superintendent from frivolous overburdening requests from board members. And also that he should put out all information requests. Everybody gets the same information, goes to the whole board.
Well, somebody scooped me because that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
And there's a process being developed, like if he feels it's too labor intensive and it take away too much time and it's appropriate value, then he'll have to go to the chair or write a little brief letter on why it can't be done or something like that. And
It's not an issue. It's not a real.
It's not an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, that sounds like
I
a
think it
good
would have to
protocol.
I think it's the establishment that we should be going to superintendent, not department heads, because I know in the past there was issues with board members going to straight to department heads when something wasn't happening
Mhm.
or something was going wrong in their department. And I know we've been working on like making sure we go through our employee.
Yeah.
Superintendent, so we should be addressing him and not going to this cabinet, not going to directly to principals.
Yeah.
And also if they're coming to us for something, we should be directing them to the superintendent too. I know some board members have relationship with
Mhm.
Staff, district staff, they report with them, and so sometimes casual conversations happen, and there's issues that come up. But those should be directed to the superintendent, not directed to us.
Yeah, perfect. And if there is a really voluminous or burdensome request, one strategy is the board could vote as to whether the full board wants the superintendent and his cabinet to spend the time to fulfill that request. So that takes the burden off of you as the chair to make the decision unilaterally.
I feel that when you got communication with expressive, that's all. Because you're gonna have that, what you here for. You know, what you said is not here for, you know, you're gonna respect your colleague, that's better, it's not that yet, I know that people are gonna be in. Or I'm not like, Joe, we're gonna have an issue, now I would have to respect your opinion, your comment, and your vote. But when you have a good communication, we can set for, and I know. Back up, this parasite, in the past, it was. You know, and the communication was term, but now having a new board and new chair and a doctor and everything, a lot of things change. Well, I mean, there's nothing perfect,
Yeah,
you know, we have to up and down, but at least it's a good respect.
yeah.
And I always ask for that, have good respect, communication, and at the end of the day, we're gonna have a nice solution.
Yeah. And that's,
Yeah, I'm still waiting on the information about how many pencils and pieces of paper receipts of Italian. I expect that from somebody.
I have a question, like general, not to this. When it comes to you as our legal counsel or firm, when there's communication with you through our chair, how do we make sure as a board, our voice is being heard by you guys? Because I know in years past, you know, the chair is the only one that voice said that should be speaking to the firm itself. But if we have questions as a member of this board, how do we get information or, you know, even the cabinet, say chair, vice chair, inspector, how do we? Because I definitely want my voice to be heard in sense of questions, because I don't know if you guys are answering the questions that we have as a board, as an individual, but as a board. And I have that question, like,
that's a good question. So I will tell you the general practice when I work with boards is that questions to communications with counsel to the board do go through the chair. That is kind of the universal practice. However, sometimes the chair will say, you know, Mr. Medina has a question. Can you reach out to him, or he's going to reach out to you? But the chair is the go-between. But that does happen. Part of it is a cost issue, right? Because if you all were calling me all the time, that would get expensive. Part of it is, to your point, what are the board's questions? Not your individual questions, but what questions does the board have for counsel? It could be a committee question. The policy committee might have a question for me or my firm, and I work a lot with policy committees. If the board has a question, then, and you all want to hear the answer, I could write an email, I could write a memo, I could come to an executive session. So there are definitely ways for you to hear directly from me. The harder question is, who develops the questions? And I think you said it yourself, the board has to develop the questions or the committee has to develop the questions. It's harder when an individual, you know, it's too, I think it would be endless if individual board members could ask legal counsel their questions. I think that would be unworkable for you all as a board. Does that help?
oh, I agree, but I
Okay.
just wanted to
Yeah,
get that.
yeah.
I think you gave us gave me definitely some instruction on how we should go about it as a board. Make sure the question is developed by us, so we already know what the question, but we'll get the answer. It could be shared with the whole board.
But, and also, I mean, I do the same thing with staff. I send a memo when we hired them on, I send a memo to staff that only limited people have the ability to contact legal due to cost for one. And I need to kind of understand how and what type of engagement is happening below me in order for me to, you know, be able to kind of make sure if I hear it from board members, I know a little bit of knowledge about what's going on. So you have to kind of limit it to a point where, you know, myself, maybe the CFO, maybe the HR person, and special ed are the main ones, because those are the main issues. You got special ed issues, you got HR issues, financial issues, and then anything that I have to bring to the table as well. So you're limited because the cost is, that's one of the things the board wanted me to make sure is that we limit the amount that we're spending on legal fees across the district. And so that's the only way that you can do it, is to do that way.
And even before we go, Smith, we're gonna go to our city attorney.
Attorney first.
So they could advise us on, you know, that'll be handled easily by
Yep.
Shipman because they're experts in policy. So let's go to that. And so that would take too much time. So they'll, Attorney Toms or, attorneys not from the savvy kind of know what we should be delegating to the firms. To save much money.
And yeah, we try to be as efficient as we possibly can. We've seen, I can't say we've seen it all because I deal with new issues every day, but one of the reasons, we are expensive, but we're also very efficient because we work with so many districts. So we've generally seen most issues before and can answer things pretty quickly without spending a lot of time. Other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment and I need to get out because I got a rock in the shoes. The part when we're talking about the policy, you know, before, I will be honest, I didn't like it. I'm not sure why. I'm giving my free time to the district. I'll be over 20 years in the district. I'll start when my son was in kindergarten until he graduated from high school. So it's me and the chairman, just like we were the oldest one, more in the church that they really know us very well. And having that situation that you said right now, you know, and now it's in the record quarter and everything, it's not a lot of things gonna happen. I'll be honest with you, a lot of things gonna be happening. But like I said, I'm giving my free time to the district. I love it. I enjoy it. I never give up. Only God is the person who can stop me. But when I said I like it, because whatever I was doing and someone here that witnessed, I can be, sometimes I'll be in the hospital and I'm online. I'll be in the hospital and I told the nurse, don't come bother me because I have a board education meeting. And if you're another person, I don't mind. You know, if whatever's happened to me in my life, they know that they know I'm always there. You know, so I'm giving my free time to be in the board, to be in the committee because I care. Now you bring this is something that bother me, to be honest, because I want to be honest. Because, you know, we're doing this free. Imagine if the state had to pay us. They wouldn't have money. They wouldn't have no money for pay.
She's just the messenger.
No, I know, I understand, don't worry, and I can thank you for that, it's not and everything, but I just want to say, because, you know, it's just something that I do it because I enjoy, I love it. You know, so.
And let me tell you, I so appreciate that you made the comment. I get it. Like I said, I have tremendous respect for all of you. My job is to help you problem solve. And let me also be clear for anybody who's watching, you didn't do anything wrong. What I suggested was a tweak. I'm trying to allow you find a way where you can keep doing what you're doing. I'm not saying to stop. I'm just trying to find a tweak so we can do it and it makes sense and it's all good going forward. So you didn't do anything wrong. You can keep doing what you're doing, but there are a couple of tweaks
Yeah,
that you might
Yeah,
want.
I understand. Yeah, I very appreciate that.
Should we like maybe add public comment and so we pass a policy?
Yeah, I think that's a good, add public comment. Your voice can still be heard. You can still attend, maybe where you sit could be different. But I'm definitely not telling you not to go. There are just a couple of tweaks you can think about.
And then maybe we can make that a priority on figuring out what we're gonna do in the committee. What do you think? James, on
Saying walking into dangerous territory when we want to start discussing budgets and budget cuts and start sitting around this table and deciding what potential $20 million we gotta cut. And not allowing board members to participate unless we allow the rest of the general public to participate, that'll be a
Where is that gonna happen?
operations committee.
crucial.
Well, then make it a full committee,
Yeah, make it a committee, a special meeting of the board,
make it a committee of the whole.
when you have to talk about budgets and. When when it's a big issue like that.
And just,
I can jump off on
yeah,
any agenda item.
yeah, I understand. That is my hand. It's,
Right, I'm trying to get it.
Brett wants to speak, so I was just gonna say that we, by making it open to the public, we just let it can't. When we let the public comment, that's at the beginning of the meeting when it's of no use, you haven't had a discussion. So we are actually in the ad hoc committee on advocacy, public speaks throughout the meeting.
Unless you do public comment, like just implement public comment every other.
Well,
You
you
could
could,
do
you
that.
could also have public participation. You could just allow public participation as we're doing in the advocacy meetings where the public is allowed to participate openly in the meeting. And then board members could participate just like the public. I mean, there's no reason you can't. There's not a lot of people that are gonna want to participate.
That's why our forums will probably alleviate that pressure to the committee meeting.
Yeah, just,
Like
that's
what
what
I'm
I'm
saying, it would alleviate that, because when we have those discussions, we're gonna be busy. I assure you. Gonna be busy.
Lorenzo?
Actually, I was just gonna bring up the same exact discussion you guys were bringing up because sometimes there's discussion on the table and then that prompts something in my head and I want to chime in on that. So I was actually gonna propose if we have a public comment at the beginning, we should have one towards the end as well or intermittently. So that's why I put down my hand. You guys kind of chatted through what I was gonna bring up. Thank you.
I see this, the last policy committee meeting was 3 hours long. Can you imagine the public debating back and forth along with the board members in that meeting?
Can't imagine them staying, frankly.
You seriously underestimate the power of somebody who wants to make issues and trouble intervening in our meetings. People sitting at home, waiting for us to notice a meeting 5 minutes late to drop a FOIA complaint on us. To come here and sit, bring a debate on, let's look at your next committee meeting, my referral about Eid. And the public coming out of Eid al-Adha and the holiday. You could get nuts at this meeting. You can get anti-Muslims, you can get pro-Muslims, you could have 50 people from the Muslim community here and 50 right-wingers over here. And everybody gets to participate. We've noticed that public can participate. We can't shut that down. We can't shut their viewpoint down. And we can't shut their viewpoint down. If we allow their viewpoint, we've got to allow that viewpoint because we cannot have viewpoint discrimination. So I see potential for big messes going wrong.
So I just want to clarify, public participation is different from public comment. I would not advise that you allow public participation or debate. For the same reason that you don't allow public participation or debate at your regular board meetings. So that itself could be a FOIA issue because all of a sudden you're down a road that wasn't noticed. My sense is that this is a big topic for you all. I think it may be wise to discuss it potentially in executive session with more of my advice, so that we can, talk a little bit more deeply about it. But I'm happy to think about ways for you to make sure that all board member voices are heard, respected, valued, participate, and that the public is able to hear and watch these meetings happen in compliance with FOIA. And I am confident that we can find a way to do both of those things, but I don't know that we're going to be able to do it tonight.
Two things. I know the board, in addition to cabinet, our board and cabinet, we're ready for anything. People can't complain for why, because trust me, we're ready for that. We are wired. We know how to handle that situation. Second, having a meeting like Mr. Zucker say, something 3 hours, something, it's gonna become, I'm more concerned to staff. Sometimes the staff, they have life. We have a lifestyle. We have life, we work and everything, but sometimes they have to come stay there in the morning. That there is not gonna tell them, you also know. They have to. So sometimes we have that situation, add more people, it's more time for them. So I respect the time, they here, so I know they do the job, but they're humans. We all humans. Yeah, so I just want to say.
Yeah. Other questions? These are good questions.
Isn't it necessarily have to do it, or we can, like I said, we can keep what it was supposed to be, or we have to change it.
I'm sorry,
Do we keep keep doing the way we doing the
with
meeting,
the committees?
or we have to? change? Yeah, I know, but I just, ask a question, just want to know.
She's advising we
I
change.
know.
So what I have shared is how the FOIA works.
Yeah.
And how the commission looks at things. I've given you a couple of options which you can try out. And if you wanted to think about maybe you try out those options in the interim, you experiment with them. If you wanted to think about a long-term plan that works best for you all, I think it would be best to talk about my advice in executive sessions so that I can provide it and keep it privileged. So there it is.
How come this never happened before you specs?
Because you never saw the legal opinion about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
It was, it
Well,
was,
it was, but it
just
didn't happen.
happened. Well, it just happened. Kay made the recognition it was
Mhm.
okay, but we still didn't vet it out legally, in every aspect of that. So that's, and it's like you're not doing anything wrong. It's just the procedural things that takes place that may get yourself in a bind.
The fact of the matter is Jody said to us a year ago that you guys are about half of what you're doing is wrong in your policy and you're better than most districts.
True things, that word.
That's
That's
right.
what he said.
Exact words.
I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing,
exactly.
but
Also,
so the state wanted to school us about how bad we were. And his comment was, oh, you're bad, but you're not as bad as so many. And it's a lot of districts have things wrong, but this just happens to be one that we need to fix now,
Yep.
because we've been advised.
Well, look, and you know what? That's exactly right, what Jody Goler said.
Yeah.
Look, there are, no district is perfect. Every district has things that they do, and all I can do as a legal advisor is tell you what the rule. And
It's good because after we done what we come, they need to keep following policy the way it is, they don't even did it before, now they have to follow the way it is where they come after us.
not seeing any other hands, I move to adjourn because I want to respect everybody's time and I know we can stay here for another hour and a half
So
discussing, but I move to adjourn. Like a motion to adjourn.
Made, Vince, we need a second by Mr. Colvin. Any debate?
Dr. Ritter.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned
Aye.
at 8:41. Thank you.
Have a good night.
thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.